Well, let's move into the king of rock and roll here because there's actually some common threads in these stories. Both he and Brownie have very deep Central Florida ties. And like Elvis Presley's rise, especially in Florida, women have kind of gotten the short shrift in this story too. And I want to tell you why. Elvis played 4 tours of Florida in 1955 and 56. In 13 months, he played 59 live shows, 4 tours of Florida. In 56, his most important and transformative year, he played more live shows in Florida than any other state in the country. More than California, New York, and Las Vegas combined. More than Mississippi, Texas, and Tennessee combined. That's why I call Florida Elvis's breakout state. So by the time he did his first national TV appearance, he'd already done 2 tours of Florida as a nobody. So he'd already toured Florida twice by the time he made his first national TV appearance. And then he toured it 2 more times later that year. And each time he just grew bigger and bigger and hotter and hotter. And the fun part about doing the research for this book was all the primary sources. And oh, was this fun. One day I'm sitting in the live truck, dead from the neck up as usual. And I get this phone call from the 305 area code, and I almost didn't answer it. Hi, this is Bob. Mr. Kealing? Yes. Bob Graham. Tell me about Elvis. And I'm like, well, Governor, I was kind of hoping you'd tell me. Bob Graham saw Elvis at the Olympia Theater in Miami as a 19-year-old freshman at the University of Florida. And he was great because he was able to give me the perspective on whether or not Elvis was really obscene or not. Can you imagine? He's shaking his hips a little bit, and he's so controversial. So Governor Graham was a great source. So was this guy, Steve Binder. Anybody see the 1968 comeback special? Oh, yeah. One of the great specials in TV history. This guy stood up to Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's pushy, overbearing manager. And he said, if we're going to do a TV special with this has-been, we're going to do it my way. Can you believe that? I mean, he didn't call him a has-been specifically, but he said, I'm going to want to meet with Elvis on my own. I don't want all these yes men, Memphis Mafia guys in there. I want to talk to him myself. And that's what he did. And he spent hours with me talking about the relationship between Presley and Tom Parker, how it worked and how it didn't work. Invaluable source. But as they're meeting, Presley goes, this is 68. Remember, he hasn't been famous for a long time. Dylan has come on the scene, the Beatles, British invasion. And he asked Binder, what do you think of my career? And Binder said without blinking, it's in the toilet. He goes, you know what? If we went out on Sunset Boulevard right now, you know what would happen? And Presley said, what? And he goes, nothing. That's what they did. Nobody recognized him. Can you believe that? Nobody recognized him. But a great primary source for this book. And here's one of the important women from this story, Annie Helm. Anybody recognize that name? Follow That Dream? She was his co-star when he filmed the movie here in 1961. This is also part of the book. And one of the cool things is she sent me these. What a great keepsake that is. She's now an artist out in California, but she was able to give me the insight about what fame was like for Presley. And by this time, when they were filming this movie, 1961, he was already starting to get into the prescription drug abuse. But he said, she said, yeah, we'd be carousing at night, and we might take something to kind of prop us up on the set in the morning, but it's not like we were drug abusers. And he certainly wasn't either. She was a great source for this book. Jim Kirk. This is he and I sitting in the very place in Florida, first place Elvis ever got to headline, 1955. And Jim gave him that chance. And he said, this was Elvis's first tour of Florida in 1955, May the 10th. And Jim's like, yeah, this Tom Parker guy, he just would not leave me alone. He kept calling me and saying, you got to let Elvis close the show. I promise he won't hurt it. If he does, I'll give you your money back. And poor Jim is like, that Tom Parker was one rare individual. I've often thought when we were having problems with the Russians, we should have sent him over there. So it was great to talk to Jim. And Elvis headlined here with like Slim Whitman and Hank Snow and Farron Young. He got to close the show. But if you look at the playbills, it still says that Elvis was way down, one of the supporting act. But Jim was the one who gave him the chance. This is the Southeastern Pavilion in Ocala, another great source. And this is Charlie Louvin, and I'm interviewing him in the Waycross City Auditorium in Georgia. He and his brother Ira opened up for Elvis on his tour of Florida in 1956. Great primary source. One of the great threads in this story are the women who covered Elvis. Certainly Jean Yothers with the Orlando Sentinel, who was the first woman, first Florida journalist to recognize the coming Elvis Presley phenomenon long before anybody else did. Elva Lee had the best coverage of anybody for Elvis. And the day he's supposed to appear at the Polk Theater in Lakeland, she's sitting on the back steps with her big, giant, heavy camera, and it's about 1,000 degrees. And Elvis breezes by her about 30 minutes before the show, and she marches in after him and says, "Excuse me, sir, I'm Elva Lee Donaldson with the Lakeland Ledger. I want to ask you some questions." And she stops him in his tracks, and he says, "Well, I'm sorry, honey. You know, I thought you were just some little girl looking for an autograph." And no, she wanted to get his picture. He stopped there. He said, "Okay, shoot." And so she did. And that's it. This is he on the back steps going up to his dressing room in the Polk Theater. This was a really important stop because this is when the controversy is starting to hit a crescendo in August of '56. There's a columnist for the Miami Herald named Herb Rao who had seen the effect that Presley had had on all of his young fans screaming and yelling. And he writes that all these fans are idiots and that parents should slap the Presley mania right off of their kids' faces. He wrote it in the Miami Herald. And Elvis heard about it and was not happy at all. Just one last section here of this book that I'd like to talk to you about, and then I'd be glad to take some more questions if you like. What I like to do with my writing and my research is leverage it to try to find historic places to give Mike Perkins more stuff to do, because he doesn't have enough to do. Right, Mike? And I've identified some places here in Florida that I think would be ripe as landmarks for the rise of young Elvis. The Homer Hesterly Armory in Tampa being one of them. This is the only place where Presley played all 4 of his tours. And if you look at my book, Elvis Ignited, this image was taken by Red Robertson in that very arena on July 31st, 1955. This is the quintessential picture of young Elvis, except maybe the one with he and Artis in Jacksonville, maybe? So it's a historic place. This is also the first venue that Tom Parker ever promoted a show long before he met Elvis Presley. So I think that place would be ripe for historic recognition. Back here in Orlando, 1219 Yates Street. That's where the unknown beatnik writer named Jack Kerouac had just come to stay with his sister at the end of 1956. And as he's making his final edits to this crazy rock and roll novel that turned out to be On the Road, he's writing a letter to his agent about how his 14-year-old nephew has a spot-on imitation of Elvis with his tennis racket. And he's writing about it there. I think that would be another place to landmark where Kerouac's doing his final edits to On the Road. Also, I couldn't talk about this story without talking about the role of yet another woman, Mae Axton, who not only promoted Presley's first tours in 1955, at the end of his last one in Jacksonville, she makes this facetious comment. She says, "I'm going to write your first million seller." And that's exactly what she did. In this little house, probably late summer 1955, she and Tommy Durden composed Heartbreak Hotel. And it became his first #1 hit. It changed his career. And this house has no historic recognition whatsoever. But the day May and Tommy wrote Heartbreak Hotel, the thing that people aren't as aware of is they took it a step further, and they asked this disc jockey to come over to the house because they wanted to cut a demo that they could play for Presley and say, this is the song we want you to record. You've got to be able to give him a chance to hear it so he knows, is this something I could do? So in that house, the same day in 1955, this disc jockey comes over and he says, yeah, well, okay, yeah, I just played this tour with Elvis, but that's a really crappy song. I don't want anything to do with it. He declined a third songwriting credit on Heartbreak Hotel. After Glenn turned down the songwriting credit, Elvis took it. And that's the only song Elvis gets songwriting credit for. He never wrote any others. But that is the story of Brownie and Elvis and a little Jack Kerouac sprinkled in. If you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear them. But thank you so much for being so attentive today. I appreciate it.